The Martyr Matrix. What is it about who we are that allows us to do these visions when others are saying you are so anti-faith in your mind, correct? I'm more about what's coming up around the bend. And what I'm seeing is there for others to enjoy or to expand upon their own vision of what they themselves might be seeing coming up around the bend. Or is it the lack of faith in oneself that Brenda inhabits, right? Do you see how the lack of faith in oneself can affect your vision of why you need to go outside of who you are in order to figure out more about how to be in this plane? I am of love of myself always. I've known that since I was a child. I've known that since I was a child. Let's think about that. I didn't have anyone else telling me that other than my family and my friends. By being who I am, I garnered the strength of those unconditional loves, correct? There were very many conditions attached to the nature of love of all as well. So what I'm saying to you is, others will say, if you are not abiding by my faith, you must lack some sort of vision for who I am. That's the nature of where I can go in my mind sometimes. I've had issues. My vision, as Brenda would say, is once it affects who I am here on this plane, or those of my children, then I have a say in what is or what isn't going to be coming through, correct? You're loved and adored by your souls always. That's the love of all. What we understand is there are very many people in this vision that are loved for who they are and want to be lifted up by others. And that's the beauty. That's the inspirational tone that many are saying. But what we're talking about here is very different. I'm willing to die for who I am. That's the self-sacrifice for a vision of love that they have determined to be worthy of that cause. How many want to hear from Joan of Arc? Okay, Brenda heard that vision brought to her yesterday when she decided that this was indeed one of those moments of revelations for people when they cross over to what they did and why they did it. There's no regrets on the other side of the veil for the most part. It is a planning and executing of soul vision that most are working with. But what you have to understand is that nature of who's telling me I need to sacrifice myself for someone else's vision of who we are to be. This is when you go into that vision of my soul is telling me to do X, Y, or Z. That was her nature. I was hearing the voice within. I had my moments of victory, my moment of defeat. Correct? That's the nature of those souls. I died for the cause, and then I came back in a different form, correct? Many are in that vision of multi-dimensional understanding. And others are in this idea of my life here is beautiful as it is, and I lift myself up whenever I can to be loved and adored by the vision of whatever higher vision they're looking to. But how many people now know they had the wool pulled over on them and ripped off their face? You see, that's the nature of what's coming up around the bend. People are going to be placing themselves in those visions of I'm a victim of those who aren't taking on my own beliefs. And therefore I'm changing the world by forcing it on them, right? Or many will say I'm being the victim of that kind of belief system. There's no force in the vision of religion for the most part. And that's why it's adored and loved by all souls, because it has its moments of victory for many souls who are saying, this is my moment of faith in my heart. and I'm told that this is who I am, and that there's more than who I am here on the line. I'm of love for myself first and foremost, correct? If you walk upon this plane, self-love is granted to you always. So what is it that you're actually looking for when you walk upon that vision of someone else's words are more worthy of me to imbibe upon than my own? You see, this is why so many in the faiths will start to create from that vision of I'm higher than what I was once I took a book upon the hand. Or it could just be any sort of vision of someone's words were inspirational to them. That's the nature of what inspiration, and that's why we say religious inspiration is one thing. I'm riding that horse, right? I'm here to do damage is where many are in their minds, because they're creating that idea of I'm of this faith and I'm able to sacrifice myself for some sort of future glory, when in fact the vision of death, of self, can only be utilized in various systems, right? That's that idea of people who are saying, I planted the seeds for it. Did I actually create the vision? To enlighten us to the nature of Joan's vision, she would have said, I was riding high in my mind. I was characteristically denied access to the vision of love from what that soul actually wanted. I was fearful for my life in many ways, even though those souls have been portraying me as fearless. Okay, anyone that takes a knife into the heart, as some here will start to realize this is not a demeaning of the vision, but it's an honest assessment of certain souls' visions of we are now colliding with those faiths who have been told that being on the death knell for their faith is somehow a glorious vision. And yet, the spiritual enlightenment vision very much knows that we are to have our best lives here. And what upon the vision do we think is manipulation of the mind, perhaps? Right? I'm here to bring you the glory of who you are here, not in some other realm. Those are those that are being manipulated into thinking that they are somehow doing someone here justice, right? Those ideas of I'm sacrificing myself for someone else's vision. Is it indeed your own vision? This is where many need to ask themselves, who planted the seeds for me to go and commit what? The ultimate sin? Right? Am I killing myself? Am I killing someone else in the process? That's a whole different story. Or am I standing up for the nations in which I reside, and in doing so, I allow others to see me for who I am and to understand me for where I'm coming from? You see, Mahatma Gandhi is one of those souls who Brenda hears from and aligns with on the vision of I'm of peace in my ways. His faith is his own, is what he would say to her. And yet, in his vision of love, that is what granted him the strength and wisdom in order to find the strength to do the visions that he needed in order to help others. So that's where some people go. I'm sacrificing myself for others because my faith has told me that's an honorable thing to do. Perhaps I have been lifted up into a higher vision of what I am here to do. You see, your paths are not just one path only. Paths of destiny are what others are claiming they were of, when in fact we know the multiple visions of dimensional awareness would say very few are fixed in their visions of what they've come here to be. you would see the multiplicity of each life when you cross over and start aligning with the value system of multiple visions of who we are. I am more than who I am here. Okay, that's the pit stop of soul, that heavenly realm. Why do you think those visions of love are coming through from those who were deemed to be of terrorist here, from a place of I'm trying to help people here, to unwind those things that are either destructive on a soul level for themselves or their families? Because you see, many will say, I'm glorifying myself in the name of another from a higher vision. And yet others here are saying we revere those who sacrifice themselves for various reasons. That's a beautiful vision, by the way. It's not being considered less than. It's being caretaken in the hearts of many who now understand. What happens to the families of those who've been so convinced that those souls were meant to do that work? Really investigate the family trees and you'll soon sign off on the life of Brenda as being beautiful. She knows those visions of self-sacrifice and what it can mean for people here who have claimed I've done the greatest service, right? We're not talking about those who are doing it for the flag, perhaps, or whatnot. This is about for my faith and that vision of faith in who I am. So that's why some of those souls are very much honored for what they chose to do in their moments by certain groups of people. Others now would look back, potentially, and say, are we creating that dynamic in our own system where people say, I need to kill people in order to put forth a vision of love? And how many are saying your vision isn't honored as such as much anymore? Many people are aligning with the vision of we don't have to kill ourselves, correct? In order to do the work that needs to be done, to highlight the beauty of my faith, to highlight the beauty of my wisdom, to highlight the beauty of my, it's like condolences for the families of those that have understood that vision. Okay, self-sacrifice is very much different versus I have been told that I must do this in order to be of love of self or of love of another. Okay, there is very few souls that ever would have their own soul coming forth with the vision saying you must go throw yourself off some cliff somewhere to prove to me that you love me. That's where some people go. That's where some people in those visions of I'm the lost ones, right? And so they're doing that vision from that place of delusion. That's another aspect, okay? And that's why we want people to start aligning with that vision of why some of those ideas are coming through, because more and more souls are coming in who are going to be doing the work here. And when we see that work coming through, you have to know that very few people realize where those seeds were planted from. And you have to ask yourself, is this being asked from my society at large? Is this the best thing that we can do for ourselves and our families, right? For God, that's you in various forms. So think carefully, what is it that I'm doing and why? And that's why people here understand that nature of self-sacrifice. Okay, that's a sacrificial lamb is where another soul would come in. And they would say, I did that vision. Well, there are many faiths who are going to start thinking that they're aligning with the truth, when in fact, more and more evidence is coming even from this plane about what did or didn't exactly happen with certain souls who are claimed that they somehow sacrificed themselves for everyone else here. You would be surprised what's coming with the third Christ soul and the information that that one's going to be bringing through. It's going to be disheartening for many souls. Okay? Their hearts are caretaking always by his soul, by the way, for knowing that there are, in fact, misdeeds done along the way within those visions of what the reality of what his soul was on this plane. We're not working with many other planes, okay? It's just like the nature of humanity on one other level has already dissipated in its vision. That's not happening here anytime soon. So, this is the nature of looking at someone. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But in essence, that's the nature of where we're going in certain ways, where people are putting forth their vision of conviction so strong that they feel that they must sacrifice themselves at the bequest of another. Think carefully about who we're talking about. If you go through this process as Brenda has, you will start to hear the various levels of vibration that you can hit. And you get different guidance from different levels. So if you think that you're actually hearing from the Christ soul, that's a different story. Some will indeed have communication with that soul. It's not what you think. It's not bad, I can tell you that. But if you feel like you understand the nature of what we are here to do, which is basically to open up to the nature of our own beauty without feeling like someone else has to dictate to us what it is we are to be. So if that is something that someone comes into willingly, as Joan of Arc did, I was willingly pushing forward in my vision of faith and the destruction of those who were not aligned within that vision of it. Do you see why that might be a problem with certain souls? What indeed was I doing? The matrix of soul is where others of spirituality are often in that vision, and they know the multidimensionality of this vision very much. When you traverse the realms of love or life, you start to get a different perspective based on where you are in your mind. Many are in the vision of mind. If you've not hit the vision of guidance for other souls, then you would understand the nature of confusion much for those souls. You see, it's not about aligning with the nature of what the matrix is or isn't. It's just the nature of understanding that when you come to this process of aligning with your own soul doesn't give you words of wisdom to go destroy who you are, most often. It's about aligning with the vision of who I am or who I am to be. And then there are choices made along the way, as we all do on this plane, and we all are of love no matter what. But it doesn't mean that I don't have access to his soul, right? That's the Gandhi soul that wants to come through again. But in essence, his vision is more of, I did the best job I could in the moment. And when people start to create plans of entry and exits from and to this plane, that's when people start to open up. We have multiple visions of how we can leave this plane. Whether or not we know that here or not is another source of vision. So let us stay on track with the nature of Jesus, correct? Was he not a martyr? Right? He wasn't in the vision of religion. It was his faith. It was his soul's vision to do what he needed to do for him. And that's the nature of where many are starting to unwind their own visions, even on this plane from various fields of vision, and going, I am beautiful. I love that soul's inspiration. And that soul is coming through many ways for many people. And there are many different channels who will bring through that vision as he was. But who he is now is very different in his soul, because what we've done is we allow for others to grow in their vision of I am of soul. I am is the nature of his wisdom. What he doesn't do is he doesn't dismiss the vision of anybody, because those are their visions of soul growth. soul expansion, soul wisdom, soul guidance, okay? So when we come to this place of love for all, we want to understand why so many are saying that they would kill for another, right? It's another's word of wisdom that many are holding so dear to their hearts that if they feel like they're being trampled upon based on those ideas, they will often feel like they've been justified in their vision of destruction. So that's why we want to look at people and ask ourselves this question. Is this a beautiful vision of inspiration for me and my family, or is this a vision of destruction for who I am to be? And if you tell yourself that self-sacrifice is beautiful, then by all means continue with that vision. If you feel like your family might have a different perspective, you might want to think carefully about what words of wisdom you're learning from. Right? Because this is where many are learning from. They're learning from others, typically. So if you're not aware of what the words in those books actually mean, based on the ideas of translations of long ago, then you might want to rethink that idea of I'm saving my faith, or I'm saving some aspect of who I am, versus I'm being utilized by other sources that have an agenda, as we have seen many times on this plane. Whether or not it is deemed of beauty or not means nothing to Brenda. It is all considered soul and of love. But that's the nature of what's coming up around the bend. People are reevaluating their faith visions for who they themselves are and what they would want to enjoy on this plane. We are here to encourage plenty of people to have the faith in who they are to create beauty wherever they go. And that means loving who you are. And that's the beauty of many of faith in the other as a source of wisdom for them. That's the beauty of it. What we deny is that idea that there was anything less than love from all souls, correct? Most people realize that the only words of wisdom that would come from the highest of the highs is basically, you are of love. And that would be the end of the story. So when you think about yourselves and what you are starting to experience in this world, you might want to think carefully about which words of wisdom you start to embody. Am I embodying the wisdom of myself, my soul, my dignity, my integrity? Or am I following the guidelines of another that's telling me that there's something wrong with who I am from the get-go? Or that I need to be a certain way in order to be loved, adored, and accepted as I am? That's the nature of what we are talking about. Most souls have not figured that out as of yet, that their vision is flawed when they go to certain ideas about what I came onto this plane to be. This plane is no less than any other. Let's put it that way. What we do is we inhabit the vision of our bodies as a limitation. And that's basically all it is. But when we go to the vision of our own soul's embodiment, perhaps, or the vision of learning from those other words of wisdom, we can start to take off enough of those limitations in our mind and raise our vibration, because we are of vibration and frequency bands, to see behind the veil of illusion. Okay, this is an illusion that we're sort of working in. But it's part of the process. So there is no right or wrong, but it's just the nature of what we are starting to work with. Those ideas of those souls who are so much convicted in their vision. How many people are trying to do things for the sake of others and then landing themselves in prisons for it? because they're so strong in those mindsets of, I must do this for my faith. You're adored by your own souls. But when we go to the societal impact vision, you'll start to see why so many people are digging in their heels, because it's hard to accept the fact that maybe, just maybe, someone else's words of wisdom are hindering my own growth from this plane into the views of another. So with that, we want to say we honor all souls. We honor all visions of love. All visions of sacrifice are to be honored. All visions of hope are to be adored. Give me the hope is where many are. And that's when people need to ride in that vision of, I am of hope. I am of prayer, perhaps. I am of wisdom. That's where men are as well. They're to be revered in many ways. Men are having a struggle of late with those visions of superiority that have been placed upon this plane in certain avenues. And we want to honor all those men who are saying, I am, and doing that vision very well, and understanding the nature of what it can be like to be from another view of faith in oneself first and foremost. Because that's where this woman rides. I know how to do my wisdom. I know how to do my work. I love you for who you are. I may agree or disagree with aspects or choices that people make. That's when I am not in the vision of guidance or of love of all. Okay? I am is who I am. And that's why many here are in that vision of doing their beauty in whatever way they see fit. So there's no judgment from a soul level, but it is something that we can start to embody as beautiful for who we are. I want to have fun here. I want to enjoy my life. I want to be prosperous, healthy, wise, serene. Right? That's part of who I am. I break free of certain conditions that were placed upon me by my family, to be reverent to all those, even those who step upon my values. That's what most are. No, I've had people who've physically attacked me before. So no, I'm not going to be one of those revered lambs that just sits back and doesn't put up a fight. And that's what I would expect from many others, because many others are saying they're fighting for their lives. That's a very different vision versus I'm caretaking those who are just telling me what to do because it serves some purpose that they themselves have bought into from time long ago. Everything has its moment. All those visions are loved for what they've brought us. Awareness of ourselves. Awareness of the, quote, other as ourselves. So we're not demeaning anyone's vision. Gandhi or Joan, anyone would be revered for what? They were a part of this plane. They were honored for their wisdom. They've been placed upon this plane in their minds. They chose to come here, as we all do. And that's the nature of what love is. Love is all that matters, is what most people understand. And yet what it is an understanding of what love is or isn't. And when people say loving someone doesn't hurt, we can honestly assume that people are now understanding why we're talking this way. If someone says that my love is here to hurt another, you most likely are not hearing it from your own soul. Your own soul is not going to set you up for another conditioning where you have to unwind it from a place of I am of that other soul. This is why many people will disconnect from the views, because they say I'm justified in everything that I'm doing. And while you may be justified in your mind, that's what you're working with. You're always loved and adored on the heart, and those views will get adjusted once you cross over. You get enlightened. Take the soul of Timothy McVeigh very seriously in the video that was previously posted, and start to rethink those ideas of who's doing what for whom. And others will say, I am nothing like that man. And yet the vision of who we do, right? Who do we do in our minds, right? Those visions of love, that's a very different version of what it is when people are starting to see more of that idea of those who are using various ideologies or belief systems to harm themselves. Okay? It's all worked out, but if you want to enjoy this plane, you might want to think twice about idolizing those who are doing those visions. Okay? They claim they were of hero worship, or they become those heroes. Very much not so. History will tell its time. Okay? So with that, I want to say thank you for watching. If you like this, please like, follow, or subscribe. I'm broadcasting this to various platforms. And so I want to say thank you again. And remember, stay curious, wise, and soulful. Have an amazing day.